Well, good afternoon here on Monday, the 26th of July at 3 p.m. Out of London. I have here with me today a dear friend, Douglas Board, whom I've known for many years and admired. And today's topic is an interesting and somewhat paradoxical one: meritocracies, why glass ceilings are closer to a feature than a bug, and what we can do about it. Now, you'll know me, I'm Michael Mainelli. I'm one of the directors of Zien, and it really is a privilege to be able to introduce so many of these webinars that we have as part of FS Club. As you know, I can only do that, we can only do that, thanks to the generosity and, dare I say, tolerance of our sponsors, who are very interested in ranging widely and freely across technology, economics, and finance. And today is going to range widely and freely across all of these areas because we frequently like to believe that we either live in meritocracies or build meritocracies. But could they, in fact, not necessarily be as meritocratic? There you go, Douglas. Meritocratic as they look or believe themselves to be. I don't want to steal Douglas's thunder, but I have known him for ages, and he's been an extremely deep thinker about some of the twists that we get ourselves into when we take cheap and quick answers on things like equality, discrimination, fairness, and employment. So my job is to get out of the way as quickly as possible, which I'll do in just a moment. Douglas will be speaking for about 20 minutes. He's got 4 poll questions to boot, so get ready. And we'll then move into a 20-minute question and answer facility. So 3 quick points, if I may. Yes, the slides will be available. I think they already are available online. Secondly, yes, this is being recorded, so you can view it another time or share it with friends and colleagues. That recording will go up in approximately 2 working days. That is Wednesday afternoon. And finally, and most importantly, yes, you can ask questions, make comments or observations, but please use the GoToWebinar questionnaire facility, and I'll feed those into our discussion with Douglas. Douglas will be getting a copy of all of the questions with your emails attached if you want to pick up on a specific point that you don't want me to raise here online. But with no further ado, if I may, Douglas, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Michael. In 2017, the Danish finance minister, Christian Jensen, said something about small nations. I think he said there are only 2 kinds of nations in Europe: small nations and nations which hadn't yet realized they're small. And it's in somewhat of the same spirit that I want to say something about glass ceilings and what this talk is about. As far as I'm concerned, there's really only 2 kinds of people in relation to glass ceilings: people who are affected by them and people who haven't yet realized that they've been affected by them. And my goal with my talk is really to try and show how we're all affected and indeed complicit, whatever your job title, whatever your pay packet. I don't particularly care how many zeros are in it, whatever your gender, whatever your ethnicity. And the reason is there is a mistake in how we think of glass ceilings, or at least I am going to contend that. So to see it, I want to start off with a quiz, like a thought experiment. I'm going to give you 4 sets of facts about a fantasy organization called Woke PLC. The facts are going to be cumulative. So when I give you the second and the third, we're keeping in play all the facts that you've already got. And as we each add each layer of facts, I'm going to be asking you, do you think Woke PLC has a glass ceiling? So your range of answers, which are going to just stay the same, bog standard, 1 for kind of probably yes, probably has a glass ceiling, 2 possibly yes, 3 possibly no, 4 probably no. This is not rocket science. We'll leave that to the billionaires. This is just to give us a sense of who we are and as our thinking as we start the conversation. Right, so here's your first set of facts about my fictitious organization, Woke PLC. It was founded by 100% fiercely fair meritocrats who walk the talk, and they only hire people like them. So there is no favoritism in Woke PLC. There is no politicking. There is no discrimination. If you want to get on in Woke PLC, you just do brilliant work. That's your first set of facts. Give me a sense then, 1, 2, 3, or 4. Would you say Woke PLC probably has a glass ceiling? Probably doesn't have a glass ceiling, or somewhere in between?
Well, it sure sounds like it's a nice place, and so it couldn't possibly have a glass ceiling, could it?
It's certainly trying hard not to. It's trying very hard not to, and it's not letting anyone in. Okay, so we got a third saying probably yes, possibly right. I like it. I like it. Now keep that. All those facts remain true, as I'm now going to add a second set of facts. When we go slice woke PLC at every level of seniority, at every level we have brilliant diversity proportions. I mean, women, ethnic minorities, sexuality, disability, you name it. Not just at the lower levels, at every level, the proportions are stunning. And the first fact remains true. They're really devoted meritocrats. So have another go at the question now. How likely is it that woke PLC has a glass ceiling?
Oh, there we go. Come on, give him a break. Half the
I've
audience
got a
would.
couple more facts up my sleeve, Michael. We're nailing this one down.
Okay, we got well over 80% have voted. Here we go. All right, so you shifted
So
them.
we're leaning towards no, and that's I'm not setting anyone up to look stupid. I'm just going to illustrate what I hope is a useful point. Let's throw in a third fact. I said about proportions of people, but I hadn't said anything yet, had I, about pay gaps? Well, let me throw pay gaps in. There are none. At every slice in this organization, on every protected characteristic you want to look at, plus add a few, there are no pay gaps. You want to give me some, you're feeling now? Have I got you practically all in the no space?
So they're nice people, complete diversity, no pay gaps. There's no way it could be half a glass ceiling.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, yeah, you know that I've written a couple of novels and they're thrillers. Obviously, it's obvious that the answer has to be going the other way, but just play along.
Okay.
That's how we'll learn something.
All right, all right.
We are definitely.
You're getting us where you want us.
I'm just going to do one last attempt for the 30% of you who are still leaning in the yes space, all in the spirit of fun. I've tried to rack my brains. I'm going to give you a fourth fact. There are no bullying or micro-exclusionary behaviors. There are no evening or weekend or other sports or semi-work related pseudo-social activities that in any kind of way are exclusionary, bullying, whatever, as well as they have no pay gaps, as well as they have perfect proportions, and as well as every single one of them is fiercely committed to fairness and meritocracy. So come on now, what we got?
Are you trying to make me leave Zien and go work for Woke PLC? Okay. Well, there's a group out there who I think are very
absolutely.
suspicious.
There's a group out there who think, look, he's doing this for a reason. Innie, of course I am. But the shift that we've seen is not me trying to make anyone else look dumber than me, not at all. It's to illustrate something really important about how we ordinarily think about glass ceilings, because I would agree that given the four sets of facts I have laid down, according to how we normally understand the glass ceiling, it's very difficult to see how there could be one. Indeed, frankly, if you were the HR director of Woke PLC and those facts were true, you would have no standard business case at all to launch any action to tackle one. Because, for example, you couldn't make a business case saying, we want the benefits of diverse decision making, because you've already got those. So in quite a serious sense, on the ordinary way we look at things, glass ceilings, there isn't one. I'm going to be trying to, this talks to me about saying there's a flaw in that. Then there's a different way, and we're going to come back to Woke PLC and see how it could all be different. Okay. Let me just, next slide, please. Okay. A little digression now. Here's a story I tell a story of three people in a lift in my book, Elites. It's about 7 in the morning in a bank, and three people are standing in a lift, a senior woman director, a 25-year-old up-and-coming youngster, and a cleaner. And they're standing there, and the lift doors open and show them the reception. And the scene, there's an empty reception, there's a set of winking share prices or market prices behind reception. And the question that I pose at this point in the book is, do these three people see the same thing as they stare out of the lift? And according to the standard Western theory of kind of how we operate in the world, they do. And we can call that operating system, I'm going to call it the SO, the solitary observer, or you could call it SO for subject object. According to this way of seeing about the world, the way we human beings are in the world is we're like our eyes are like pinhole cameras wired up to solitary minds. And the roots of this kind of operating system or philosophy certainly go back as far as Descartes, the idea of the solitary mind. They certainly go back to Kant, but one of my favorites is it's brilliantly exemplified in the wonderful books by Lee Child, the Jack Reacher books. The solitary observer and actor, the single mind who observes the world in all its physical detail. It's so embedded. It's like the proverbial, we're like the fish in water. We don't notice it, and also we don't notice that it's wrong. Because actually, when the lift doors open, what we see is not served up to us by eyes like pinhole cameras. It's much more like a browser on the internet, shows you something that's already interpreted, already highlights some things that are more important for you, already indicates certain actions are kind of pressed upon you as things that you might want to consider doing, and those actions are appropriate to your social position. So the youngster who popped downstairs for a cigarette notices the spilt milk on the coffee table where he'd left his breakfast because he wasn't expecting visitors, while the director has already started, even before thinking about it, reaching for her BlackBerry because of what she needs to do because of the market prices, and the cleaner has already, even before thinking about it, started to grip the mop more tightly because of the coffee spill that she's going to wipe up. The idea that the way we are in the world is not as a pinhole camera, but as a browser that already interprets the world for us, does not take away free will. The director can reach across the cleaner and pick up the mop, just not very likely to. And this way of understanding how we are in the world, I'm going to call GR or game running. The game is running already. The browser is downloaded in our minds, and it's social. Like browsers on our computers, it updates in the background when we're not noticing. It doesn't just show us a browser that doesn't just show us the world, it shapes what we think is obvious in the world. And some of the names that you might associate with the kind of view for which I'm putting as the second operating system, the famous sociologist Pierre Bourdieu, another sociologist Norbert Elias, Gillian Tett has popularized the word habitus, and I'm also going to acknowledge the South African word Ubuntu. You look at the book to see more detail about these two things. Let's go to the next slide. So let's go back to our thought experiment and to Oak PLC. Received wisdom, our operating system, tells us to think of a glass ceiling as a failure of merit. Glass ceilings arise out of bad intent or unconscious bias. The facts that I gave you about Woke PLC basically give us pure merit, so there could be no glass ceiling. And also notice in this ordinary theory of glass ceilings that there's no particular theory to indicate how high up in terms of the seniority in the organization we might expect the glass ceiling to be. Why would bad intent or unconscious bias only occur at a certain altitude? That's left unexplained. My book Elite shows you the working world through the other operating system, through a game running lens. It's taken me a decade and 5 books since I finished my doctorate in 2010. I've been busting a gut to try and write it as accessibly as possible. And what I want to stress is it's not take it or leave it. It's not one of those books that you read and you think, well, I just have to decide if I believe this guy or not. It is testable by you against your experience of the world. If it enables you to understand your working world better, then it has some merit. And if it doesn't, just chuck it in the bin. And I'm delighted that at least feedback from a range of places, including individual readers, suggests that it's not a complete failure. So when we analyze in the book this way, we discover that merit comes with glass ceilings built in, because the standard Western operating system, where we think we look and we see things, deludes us into thinking that merit is something almost like a physical thing that we can objectively see. But no, merit is what's produced by a human game. And as we explore how human games work, we'll find that the glass ceiling is built into the potential we have as human beings for how we connect and exist. And point two, if we look at it this way, this theory will tell us where to look for the glass ceiling. It will say, let's take Woke PLC, let's find the 2 or 3 most powerful people in it, then let's draw a cloud of those people who could, let's say, get personal favors done by certainly get personal phone calls returned by the 2 or 3 most powerful people in Work PLC. Let's draw that boundary. How big that is will depend on the culture of the organization. But that's my first stab. At the boundary there is where we're going to look for the glass ceiling. And what we're going to notice, what we're going to expect to find, is signs of burnout and exhaustion. In the book, I call the level above the glass ceiling wizards, and the level below the glass ceiling muggles, and the level just bumping up against the glass ceiling and getting scorched quite often, the muggle crust. So how could Woke PLC have a glass ceiling? And where would it be? Well, I want you to imagine that this is how Woke PLC proceeds. It's very fiercely meritocratic. It promotes only on merit. I told you that. As we get towards the C-suite, what we find in Woke PLC is that they find that their internal people of whatever gender, color, pay packet, schooling, only very few of them are really good enough to join the wizards. So the way they resolve that in Woke PLC is they use merit-based external hiring, and they fill the upper ranks to populate the upper ranks with wizards that they laterally recruit from other respected organizations. All of this done in the most fair way, so we've got the right proportions and no pay gaps and all of that. But there's still the scorch marks within Woke PLC itself. There's still that layer where people are trying hard and finding that they just can't get through to the top layer, very few of them do. And that's how a glass ceiling, could exist in something like Woke PLC, and if my book is right, actually would be likely to, unless some corrective action's taken. Now, Woke PLC was a completely theoretical construct to try and illustrate almost a philosophical point. But let me just point to something factual that's not so dissimilar. If you consider women in corporate UK, we know that in boards, including non-executive roles, we're now at 1 in 3 women in boards, but we're still only at 1 in 8 in senior executive teams. There is some phenomenon going on there that's making it quite hard to rise up directly the merit rank, but is allowing people to be brought in from outside. Could I have the next slide, please? I'll go quite fast, so it's a bit of a catch up. If what I'm talking about isn't just some amusing little parlor game, but really is about a possible flaw in standard Western operating systems, then I should be able to illustrate it by pointing to flaws in books by rather famous and bigger thinkers than me. So I'm just going to point to 2. Gary Hamel, who some describe as the West's leading management thinker, his book with Michaela Zanini, Humanocracy, Creating Organizations as Amazing as the People Inside Them. It begins with endorsements from 25 wizards. It's very zeitgeisty about creating organizations with no ceilings at all, let alone glass ceilings. Its mantra, its philosophy right at the beginning is build organizations in which you are never given reason to feel inferior to higher ups. What I'm saying in elites is that that's actually a humanly and philosophically impossible thing to do. The ceilings come built in with the idea of merit. Now, a very different book, also from 2020 by Michael Sandel, The Tyranny of Merit, is not so much zeitgeisty as really it's Michael Young's 1958 classic, The Rise of Meritocracy Updated. But here you might notice, if you compare it with my book, that he endlessly discusses social mobility, but there's no discussion at all of downward social mobility. And you might just stop for a minute and think, hang on a minute, not really possible to have a world in which everyone's upwardly socially mobile. And Michael Sandel clearly is a great mind. His best plan for how we need to fix the world is his plan for changing elite college entry in the United States. And his best plan is that we take the Ivy League colleges and maybe some others, and that if you qualify academically to get an undergraduate place at that level of college, you should then be put into a random pool and randomly allocated to your college. And that seriously is his best offer of a practical recommendation. So let's just say if we go to elites, could go to slide 5. What are the kind of recommendations? Let's say we'll get to these in questions, but there are benefits from looking at things my way, I would say, for individuals in terms of, and I see this as a coach, in terms of people having a sense of relief about their careers, an enhanced sense of self-respect, a sense of more choice about whether they're climbing or not and why, and a sense of breaking free from long set expectations, whether those are class-based expectations that they shouldn't rise to the top, or whether those are class-based or parental expectations that they must rise to the top and that there's some kind of failure if they don't. There are recommendations for organizations, and I would just highlight one, is possibly putting a 20-year limit on total FTSE 100 board service for individuals, counting each board separately. And there are implications for society, which speak to aloneness, about reconnecting the ordinary and the extraordinary in human life, and about what the purpose of business might be. The purpose of business, for which elites ends up arguing, is that maybe the purpose of business is to create places of extraordinary achievement in which ordinary lives matter. So to the final slide. Thank you very much for your time. Looking forward to the questions. And just to mention that in the book, there are action takeaways on how to survive elites, how to join elites, and how to change the system. And the publisher's given us for 24 hours a code ZIEN, which if you use at the checkout, and Morgan will put this in the chat, you'll get 30% off the book. But now I look forward to being kebabbed with the questions.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Douglas. John Spain, during your session of questions, was wondering, is this like the mythical poor lawyer who didn't pick up the £5 note on the footpath? So there you go, John. You've now got your 30% discount on the book. To kick off with I think it's a good point here. Charles Vermont is asking, what are your thoughts? Does reality not exist? Is there only perception?
There was a moment in the middle of my doctorate when I was sitting on the grass. We're having a lunch break, and the building was behind us. And I was in the first year of my doctorate, and my mind was melting down, right? Some of the other guys said, "I'll meet you in the bar afterwards." And I wanted to jump up and scream and say, "For God's sake, you're saying meet you in the bar. You're all in no doubt that there is a bar to go to meet in." Well, I hung in there. And I think the answer I'd give now is, I personally, because I'm a Christian, I'm a theist, I personally think there probably is a reality, but all we humans can access is within the world of human meaning. We can't think things that are outside the world of human meaning. The world of human meaning changes through time as different ideas and cultures change. And within the world of human meaning, everything's constructed by us. So there probably is a bar, but when we talk about it, we can only grope at it through our browser. That's my take, anyway.
Oh, I thought you meant for a second there, a bar to advancement. And Hugh Purser reminds us that it was at one of these sessions somebody referred to the fact that there's no glass ceilings, only glass high heels. Anyway. Yeah.
Worn by people of either gender, I'm certain.
You said at the very beginning of your talk that people are making a mistake. Could you just specify that mistake clearly?
Yeah. The mistake is to think that any meritocracy can be a meritocracy all the way to the top. At the top of the meritocracy, it needs to become something else in order to have been a meritocracy in the first place. And the mistake that we end up with is that because we're all complicit in a dance in which we really try hard to believe it's meritocracy all the way to the top, we all end up giving too much respect to those at the very top. And so another way of looking at my book is it's about a global misallocation of respect in our society. My book isn't about trashing those who are at the top, not at all. They actually do something quite important. And in my book, I encourage, especially individuals who thought that the top is not for them, I'm encouraging them to say, no, go on, actually have a go at it. We need you up there. But we should give respect to the people at the top, but we give far too much. It's like a winner takes all thing. We give far too much to the very top, and beneath them are, in any organization that I've ever known, there are some wonderful leaders, there's some wonderful managers, there's some wonderful professionals, economists, technicians, who are in many ways, they're my hidden heroes, and we don't know who they are. They partly can't tell us because of organizational confidentiality, but I get to meet some of them through coaching, and I partly wrote this book to say they're there, and I want to celebrate their existence.
Okay. Bob McDowell points out, but surely that the attributes of merit change over time. Merit is not a constant and consistent set of attributes or values. These have to change in response to social and other norms.
Absolutely, 100% agree with that. So in the book, as far as I'm concerned, there isn't one kind of merit. Merit is what develops in a practice, in a set of activities, and it's generated from within those activities, and it can be contested. There's an example I use in the book from one of my trips to South Africa of this craze, this highly dangerous craze started in Soweto of train surfing. Youngsters, unemployed black kids, would clamber on the roofs of commuter trains and do an absolutely lethal kind of dance, dicing with pylons and whatever as the commuter train, because they had nothing else in their life. We weren't giving them anything else worth living for. And they had competitions and they had a sense of merit. Merit is embedded in in the games we play. So there certainly isn't one kind of merit. I agree with that.
You spoke earlier about wizards from other groups. And what we've been trying to do, certainly at board level, we believe, has been to encourage diversity. And yet it would appear that this glass ceiling approach, doesn't lead to have much to say about diversity at the top.
All the things that we've been doing help. But I'm suggesting that we haven't got to the root cause. And if I want to say, what would be an action if you're on a board that you wanted to say, well, can I try and grapple with the root cause a bit more? I would start off by saying, right, let's try and get a handle on the stories, the hidden hero stories of those just below your C-suite. Now, it's a little tricky to access this, particularly if you're a non-executive director, because the rules of governance are very fierce and kind of stop you. But if your organization has a panel of coaches, for example, and your coaches work with that level that I call the muggle crust just below the glass ceiling, you could go and talk to your coaches and say, look, no names, no patrol, but I'd like to understand some of the hero stories, if there are any, of this hidden group. And your coaches might not tell you anything impressive, in which case you should conclude that I'm wrong. But if your coaches tell you some quite remarkable stories, and certainly I could, of what goes on at that level, then you'll immediately start to see that the heroism that's visible to you of the C-suite and that you reward with stock options and with all the other paraphernalia is only possible because of the hidden heroism of those at the level below who really are doing tough jobs of leadership and management. But unlike the C-suite, we don't give them the privilege of making up the fairy tale that they're supposed to be playing in. So they have a tough job. So that would be kind of how I would start to get into it, and then start to realize how it might be possible that you could be overpaying the C-suite relative to the D-suite. B, when you come to succession planning, don't be quite so quick to just say, yes, no, we've got no one here, or there's only one person in our organization, who could remotely succeed, Frank, and you all nod and, just be careful about that.
Olivia Bosch is wondering if you just provide an example of hidden heroism.
Yeah. My book opens with a true story from coaching, where I've just had to slightly disguise one thing in order not to give it away. But I coached a woman finance director, who I call Catherine, who was in a one of Britain's 50 biggest employers. The COO left to go to a competitor. So the CEO, who I call Henry, asked Catherine to double up and do her day job as finance director and also be COO in a highly operations heavy, big organization. And she did that for months, had done that for months, and the organization had recruited a COO designate from outside, i.e. not her, but that person was on, I think, 9 months gardening leave, so she ended up doing about a year, 18 months doing both jobs. Now, during that period, she got a 10% pay increase because that was company policy when you acted up. And at the end of that time, Henry called her in and said he really appreciated, because the new person was about to come in, he said he really appreciated her total sacrifice. Also, I say hidden heroism, because all during that time, her job was to make Henry look good, and she did, while doing the job as best she could. At the end of that time, Henry called her in and said, Catherine, I really appreciate all that you've done. I'm going to nominate you for the special bonus that we have system in this organization. Now, that was not a huge amount of money, but the organization had a system where each senior manager could nominate one person and one person only for a special bonus. So at least she was grateful for the thought, so she thought. And then the day came when the bonuses were supposed to be paid and nothing arrived in her bank account. And so she went to the payroll manager and just said, is there a delay in paying the bonuses? And the payroll manager, many grades her junior, looked at her and said, oh, but you can't be getting a special bonus. He didn't give you a top performance marking. You'd have to get a top performance marking to be eligible for a special bonus. Well, let's just say that the story is very unusual, because within a few days, Henry, who is the CEO of one of Britain's 50 largest employers, was invited by the nominations committee to go and leave. But it's an extreme example of someone for a long time doing really heroic stuff and getting kicked in the teeth for it and being expected as part of corporate loyalty to say nothing.
Donald McCrae, I think, is asking a question that we've all got on our minds. Can there be a robust measure of merit, or is it therefore subjective and subject to the situation and basic human prejudices?
Well, one of the things I'm delighted to be part of is I'm one of the 5 non-lawyers who are part of the 10-member Queen's Counsel selection panel. The Queen's Counsel selection panel runs the QC competition, and it is intended to select for excellence in advocacy. And one of the things that I had no hand in designing that system, by the way, but it's a really good system. And one of the ways we can actually get a better take on merit is right at the very top, by having a regular flow of outsiders and insiders arguing with each other. We can overcome some of the way the glass ceiling effect creeps in. So there are some practical things that we can do, but I think my broader answer would be to say, it took me a few years post-doctorate to find some words for it. I think all human decision making always involves what I call scientific, political, and intuitive elements. We can't get to scientific only or objective only answers in human things, but what we can do is that in anything where we're taking decisions, whether it's about the future of a business, whether it's about our responsiveness to the climate, whether it's about handing out awards and pay increases, what we can do is in those decision-making bodies, ask ourselves rigorously, have we asked ourselves not just the best scientific questions about the tasks in front of us, but have we asked ourselves the best political questions? And are we able to surface the best intuitive questions? If we are really surfacing those 3 types of questions and really listening to each other, then we're doing as well as we humans are capable of doing, I believe.
Bob McDowell again. Life at the top is increasingly a short transitory experience, but people don't seem to know when to leave the top slots above the glass ceiling. And isn't that also part of the problem?
Yes, I think it is, because one of the things that I think is built in order to successfully become a wizard, i.e. on top of the glass ceiling in a glass ceiling in relation to any particular practice or industry or profession or activity. There'll be different ones. One of the things my book says is part of the wizard mentality is you have to switch from fear of failure to almost a belief that you can't fail, and a faith that no matter how egregious, you may even get sent to prison, no matter how egregious you fail, once you're a wizard, you'll always be a wizard and you'll be rescued somehow. So I think that for reasons for which individuals are not to blame, that is an institutional hazard. And that's partly why, I'm suggesting that we just think about, if we had a limit of 20 years on any individual's cumulative service, each board counted separately, on FTSE 100 or equivalent boards. Now, those are very big boards. Michael, you and I know that. It's not just any old board. But, then those who are lucky enough to get to that level would, be able to have a think kind of like, actually, I only get to make this contribution for a defined period of time. Let's make the most of it. But also then B, without any sense of disgrace, they would rotate off and make space for others. And of course, they wouldn't be lost to society. They'd be highly well-paid consultants and distinguished emeriti, this, that, and the other.
I'm going to dip back to Hugh for a second, Hugh Purser. Douglas, what's the quickest way to get from that 1-to-8 ratio of women in senior executive teams to 1-to-1 or whatever?
Well, I think that where my mind starts is, right, so we all acknowledge that there's absolutely no point in getting there quickly with appointments which don't work, because that just really knocks us all back 50 years and is a disgrace into the treatment of those individuals, as well as some other stuff. So there's a limit on how quickly, but I think we have to go back and realize that the glass ceiling, in the way I'm proposing it, needs to be understood. It starts its psychological and browser conditioning effects way below the top. So we need to be looking 2 or 3 levels below the top, or indeed, if your organization, you heavily source externally, those, and looking at what is the gender messaging, what's the gender messaging there, and also what are the practical things, potentially around career breaks or whatever it may be, and acting earlier. And just really, I think the other thing we could do, I think the most game-changing thing that my book could propose is that actually we tell more of the stories of the hidden heroes just below the top. Now, we may need to do that, may need someone like Zien to publish an anonymized collection drawn from a range of firms, because there's always a very particular reason why I couldn't name the particular person and the particular firm in that story. But actually, if we had more stories, true stories about the level below, it would encourage, including from women, that would encourage more people through, and that would seem a more achievable objective. And then the gap from there to the C-suite and to the very top doesn't look as exaggerated as it is now.
Yeah. Graham Elliott, any links you'd like to draw to the Peter Principle, that everyone is promoted one level higher than their competence?
Yeah, if I can help the glass ceiling be understood in anything as a simple and widespread way as the Peter Principle, then I would have done the world a great service.
Oh, good.
I think where I would differ with the Peter Principle, what I differ, I think that at the top levels, in the most elite levels of all our activities, in there we do find some of our best leaders, professionals, and managers, some mixed with some others who are incompetent or who are talented, otherwise talented, but some of our best are not at the top, they're at the level below. So that would be my version of the Peter Principle.
Douglas Andrews is curious, do corporate HR departments reinforce glass ceilings within organizations?
I think many inadvertently do, because much of what is churned out in HR is well-intentioned, but fails spectacularly to address the reality of politics and power. And so insofar as an HR department issues competency frameworks and supports initiatives to help people get to the very top that don't even discuss power and politics, but proceed in a very clean way, then in fact, I'm sorry to say, they are the repair crews repairing the glass ceiling.
I'm going to wander for a second, slightly philosophically. One of the problems I've always had is that many discussions of the top levels of organizations in areas like, for example, strategy or anything, recognize that the entity is a process. This is a system, and it's a bit like that mathematical puzzle. What is a set of all puzzles that don't contain this set?
Yes.
That what you're trying to do is you're trying to fight an entity that is a process entity, and it can't exist unless it has process. So some of
Yes.
the things you suggest, randomness, is to sort of say, well, the process wouldn't be random, and therefore we need to inject randomness into it. Another thing I've tried over the years is to try and get people to make decisions in different orders, so that, for example, junior people have to speak first, or the most senior
Right.
person at the end has to defend the opposite of whatever the committee appears to decide. So that's another
Oh, that's
important thing,
that's quite a neat one.
something I've
Yeah,
tried.
so I think that one of the systemic things that that my book's trying to say is we have lost sight of how in human affairs the extraordinary and the ordinary are inseparably connected.
Mm,
We fixate on the extraordinary, and we've got the Olympics going on now. It's spectacular, it's all of that. But we somehow lose the connections between the extraordinary and the ordinary. And in a systemic-like way, they actually are connected. Dominic Barton, I think it was, who, when he left McKinsey, perpetrated something which I slammed quite hard in the book, which was the idea that it's only 2% of any organization's workforce that do 80% of the work. There was no data to back this up at all. And so I
mm,
waited the next day for him to announce that McKinsey were making 98% of their staff redundant. And of course
mm.
they didn't. Actually, extraordinary achievement and ordinary human life and ordinary lives mattering are more closely connected, like a system, than we've allowed ourselves to think.
Well, certainly, one of the things for me on HR departments is I often feel, again, in that randomness, they try and find what they think is the best person for the job, when in reality, many people could do the job. And I often think the decision should be to remove those people who will definitely fail, and you can sometimes do that. And
Yeah.
then I wouldn't mind a coin toss or a die being thrown. But uh, let me just return to a couple of quick questions, if we could. Firstly, Charles Vermont, and somewhat, I guess, related to what I've just said about process. Do you believe all hierarchical management structures are inherently immoral or amoral, for that matter?
No, I think they can be. I think they can be moral, but I think they are inherently political.
Okay. Um, we've got a few others here. Hugh Purser again, is the SOGR differentiation that you spoke about evident in non-Western cultures, for example, in Asia?
Um, I'm not competent to speak about Asia, but my own journey was sparked by Ubuntu from South Africa,
Mm,
and a very great honor I had in February, because I was fearful of all the things around, neocolonialism and cultural imperialism and all that. But the Anglican bishops of Southern Africa invited me to give the morning reflections over 3 days based on this book, and that was pretty scary, taking
mm.
Ubuntu back to South Africa. But I'm glad to say that they seem to welcome it and have decided that this book is the book they're reading together this year.
Shirley Tilakawarda is wondering, if some of our best are not at the top, shouldn't we really be querying that and rectifying that gap, contending that we see minimal diversity at that level? Joanna Saw, maybe I'll pick you up on this one. Are wizards interested in removing the glass ceiling?
Only a few, but the good news is there's two pieces of fundamental good news I believe in the book. So first is, so I repeat, the book is testable against your experience. It is not a diatribe by me that you just have to kind of, you testable against your experience and throw it away if it doesn't better illuminate your own experience. But if that has truth, then there's two pieces of good news. One is our society has a lot more brilliant, talented, and committed leaders, managers, and professionals than we realize, because they're hiding at the level below. And they're not wizards, and many of them are willing to change the system. And secondly, I use the metaphor all the way through the book, and why I use the language of wizards and muggles is that we're part of a theater of a giant complicity, a game we're playing with each other. And I call it like a magic trick. And if we can just show this is how the magic trick works, which is what the book tries to do, then I say the theatre will find it needs to book a new production. The world will have to change because that illusion in and of itself will crumble.
Well, that is a wonderful note on which to end this webinar. And if I can, 3 quick rounds of thanks. Firstly, to our sponsors. I hope this has given you a richer view of what people mean by glass ceilings and what you might be able to do about it. I'd like to thank you, the audience. You've been particularly vibrant today. And as I said, all those questions and comments, and a couple I haven't had time to get to, will be sent to Douglas if he wants to respond to you. We have a number of events coming up for you, not least tomorrow afternoon. We'll be discussing Jersey as a global financial center. Wednesday, we have a fascinating session from Cynthia Wu dialing in from China with one of the biggest cryptocurrency folks on the block, trying to explain this parallel financial world. And on Friday, we're going to be looking at privacy enhancing technology. So it's still a rich week ahead. But Douglas, may I thank you? You've always been a very thoughtful, considerate, moral person, and I've always admired you for that. I'm unable in these days of technology to summarize something as great as this, nor in fact, sadly, can I open the floodgates of applause. But I have here my Korean karmic clapper, which I use for my ersatz applause. And I know on behalf of everyone here, we've really enjoyed this session and look forward to your next book. Thank you.
Thank you.